Chapter 2757. At the same time, a gust of raging wind suddenly rose, sweeping across the place where Qiao Jin was standing earlier. Boom, boom, boom. The deafening sound of the explosion reverberated through the air. A huge pit was formed on the ground. Dust billowed as it filled the surroundings. The ground also gave off a short period of tremors. If Qiao Jin hadn't avoided it earlier, Qiao Jin would definitely be buried in that huge pit by now. The horizon seemed to have been covered with a thick layer of ink in a split second. It was a patch of darkness, making one feel suffocated. The surrounding guests were stunned by the sudden change in the surroundings. What's going on? What's going on? Why did the weather suddenly change? Numerous terrified discussions resounded in the public square. The guests' hearts had an indescribable feeling of uneasiness, as it kept on surging. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as she raised her eyes to look at the dark sky, as her pink lips pursed slightly. She looked at Qiao Jin and asked in a low voice, "Are you hurt?" "No." Qiao Jin shook his head, as his expression was grave. "They don't come with good intentions, be careful." Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes. She naturally felt the oppressive feeling from this surge of energy. Indeed, they didn't come with good intentions. Moreover, they were obviously here for her. She sunk her eyes, and between her eyes, there was an obscure glint. Yan Zhenfei has been brought away. Qiao Jin's gaze swept towards the place where Yan Zhenfei laid earlier. The dust dispersed. Indeed, Yan Zhenfei's figure was nowhere to be seen. Even Sun Yutong and Mei, who were not too far away, had also disappeared. "The people from secluded palace are here." Qiao Jin immediately reacted. Following that, he instinctively turned around and speedily returned to Yan Xiaoyi's side, as he hugged her shoulders tightly, in a protective posture. Secluded palace. Yan Xiaoyi's brows creased tightly as she raised her head and looked at the sky full of thick ink. She's really willing to be in cahoots with the devil for power now. "Do you still mind?" Qiao Jin asked in a low voice. "Mind?" Yan Xiaoyi's eyes had a moment of chaos. After some time, her lips twitched as she gave a low laugh. "Don't mind, I've never asked for family, so why would I mind? Only, I find it rather amusing." The Yan family had bet all their treasures on Yan Zhenfei. He was even willing to stand on the side of the dark forces for Yan Zhenfei, abandoning the place he grew up in to help the dark forces invade the western continent. Now, Yan Zhenfei didn't just abandon the Yan family. He even sold his soul. If the Yan family knew that the Yan family would end up like this, would he still value Yan Zhenfei without any hesitation back then? She chuckled. As she smiled, the expression on her face returned to her usual calmness. All of this had nothing to do with her. The current her only needed Qiao Jin, Yiqing Luo and the other brothers, and that was enough. Just as the two of them were talking, suddenly, the row of guards from the Palace of Darkness started to move in unison. They quickly stood up straight and straightened their backs. Then, they cupped their fists and respectfully knelt down in a certain direction in the sky. "Welcome, Second Palace Master." The guards' voices were loud and clear. The guests were shocked. They dug their ears and looked at the guards kneeling on the ground in disbelief. What did they say? Second Palace Master. The Second Palace Master of the Palace of Darkness. This bunch of guards who disregarded the orders of Yan Zhenfei, the Palace of Darkness envoy, were kneeling down to welcome the Second Palace Master. Chapter 2758. The sky was filled with thick ink as the black fog surged. Gradually, a black sedan descended from the sky. Surrounding the sedan were four beautiful ladies who looked the same as those Palace of Darkness guards. The black veil floated and the figure in the sedan was faintly discernible. Dong! The sedan landed on the ground and a majestic aura spread out in all directions. It made the atmosphere of the grand ceremony to become extremely solemn and solemn. At this moment, the guests even breathed cautiously. This was the second palace lord of darkness's palace. Everyone was shocked by the second palace lord's aura. But Yiqing Luo's focus wasn't on the second palace lord at all. She squinted her eyes as she looked at those guards who were kneeling on the ground. These guards' actions were a little too neat. Back then, the godless island's three evils, because they were triplets, their hearts were linked so they were able to move as one. But these guards, even if they had been trained together since young, it was impossible for them to be able to do it perfectly right. Furthermore, their voices sounded extremely rigid. As compared to Mo Yu Ying's rigid, it was even more stiff. There was an indescribable strange feeling. These guards. It was probably true and they were hiding some secret. I heard that someone in the Miao tribe bullied our Palace of Darkness's envoy. The lady's cold voice had a special vixen feeling. A fair jade-like hand lifted up the black veil of the sedan. Following that, an exquisitely dressed lady dressed in the Palace of Darkness's long robe walked out. The lady was wearing a black veil, revealing only that pair of fox-like eyes, which could captivate one's soul. This woman's temperament was filled with the natural charm of a fox. Totally not on the same level as May's pretentious seductive look. The guests present, even if they were ladies, were captivated by the second palace lord of darkness's beauty. The second palace lord walked down the sedan and the beautiful maids behind her went forward to support her. The second palace lord's footsteps were elegant and dignified. Her captivating eyes lightly swept past Mei and Yen Jinfei who were lying on the side of the sedan, who hurt the Palace of Darkness's envoy. Hu Mei's voice sounded softly. It was just like a normal question. However, everyone knew that it was just an illusion. The more soul-stirringly beautiful a woman was, the more dangerous it was. Especially when it was a beautiful woman with such a powerful aura and such a noble identity, what was even more dangerous was that it couldn't be touched. Under the immense pressure, everyone turned their gazes towards Yiqing Luo in unison. The second palace master's enchanting eyes curved into crescents as he followed everyone's gaze and looked over. Their eyes met. The second palace master's eyes flickered and he smiled. "Why did you injure our palace's envoy?" The second palace lord's voice was very gentle. It was impossible to tell that he was here to seek justice for his envoy at all. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she smiled evilly, legitimate self-defense. The deputy palace master tilted his head and continued to ask with a smile, "So, it was my emissary who made the first move? Is it important who made the first move?" Yiqing Luo had no interest in second palace lord's smiling tiger mask. The deputy palace master did not get angry. Instead, he nodded in agreement. "Indeed, it's not important." The two of them spoke one after another. The surrounding guests were all dumbfounded. According to the normal development of the plot, shouldn't they take action directly and fight? Chapter 2759. None of the guests had noticed the undercurrent between Yiqing Luo and second palace lord. But that didn't mean that Dmo Xian and the rest couldn't sense it. Zhou Mo poked his own arm as he trembled while looking at Gue Wu. "Do all women get along like this?" Her face was smiling and her tone was gentle. But every word and sentence was filled with undercurrent. On the other side, Yiqing Luo's smile was tainted with a trace of treachery. She tilted her head as the smile in her eyes became more and more evil. "Since it's not important, why did second palace lord ask?" Second palace lord seemed to be tired of the confrontation with Yiqing Luo as she lowered her eyes and continued laughing. "Young lady, the important thing is, you hurt my envoy. So, what does second palace lord intend to do?" Yiqing Luo raised her brows evilly. Second Palace Lord slowly walked towards Yiqing Luo as her actions were elegant and noble. You also know that the reputation of the secluded palace cannot be destroyed. You hurt my envoy, and that is challenging the prestige of the secluded palace. If I don't seek justice for the secluded palace's envoy, how would I be able to bear the title of Second Palace Lord? Young lady, do you think what I said is right? I thought that the secluded palace had long lost its reputation. Yiqing Luo didn't have any intention to retreat as she looked at Second Palace Lord, who was walking over with a smile. Second Palace Lord brought along an oppressive aura. As though she wanted to envelop Yiqing Luo in her oppressive aura. Yiqing Luo's brows raised slightly as her eyes were calm. After all, your envoy can't even command a guard. Until Yiqing Luo finished her words. Second Palace Lord didn't say a word. She raised her brows in interest as she sized Yiqing Luo up. As though she was surprised about something. This daring young lady was totally unafraid of her oppressive aura. The Second Palace Master's interest was piqued. Her mesmerizing eyes curved even more, and the smile in her voice deepened. Young lady, you're right. That's why I've come all the way here to punish these guards who have no foresight. Second Palace Lord's last word was settled. Faintly, there was a biting cold murderous intent. Following that, there was a burst of horrifying airwave, bam. The Second Palace Master waved his sleeves. The thick profound energy was as fast as lightning as it charged towards the guards of the Abyss Palace who were kneeling in a row and not moving at all. Dong, 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 several heavy objects fell to the ground. The dozen or so secluded palace guards didn't even have the chance to scream before they died. They fell to the ground one after another. However, the most frightening thing was not the Second Palace Master's ruthless killing. Instead, it was extremely strange. It was so strange that the guests, who were used to seeing killing, all stood up. Some even screamed. When many women saw this scene, they all leaned towards the men beside them, seeking comfort. On the ground, the guards of the Dark Abyss Palace laid motionlessly. There is a kind of creepy feeling. The dozen guards were originally kneeling in a neat row on the ground. At this moment, they were neatly lined up in a row. One by one, they neatly fell to the ground. Be it the posture or the expression, they were all exactly the same, without the slightest deviation. This was only one of the strangest things. Chapter 2760. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she took a closer look. After staring for some time, she frowned slightly. Could it be that the reason why these guards died was because the Second Palace Lord's profound chi had condensed into a blade and slit their necks? But that wasn't right. Why was it that when their necks were slit, there wasn't a drop of blood? Was it because this Second Palace Lord's skills were swift? No matter how fast it was impossible that there wasn't a drop of blood. What on earth was going on? Hiss. This Second Palace Lord, what on earth is she doing? She actually killed her own people? Isn't she afraid that after killing those guards, no one will protect her? She only has those 4 personal maids by her side. If something really happened, will they be able to protect her? Are you silly? Immediately, a guest retorted, didn't we see how powerful those guards were? However, the Vice Palace Master of the Gloomy Palace only moved her sleeves and easily killed more than 10 guards at the same time. Can't you see her strength? The Second Palace Lord of the Nether Palace is totally able to fight against 100, why would she need the protection of those guards? Isn't it because she's the Second Palace Lord of the Nether Palace and these guards are unable to resist? Hee hee. Earlier Second Palace Lord Speed, if it was you, would you be able to evade it? That guest who had doubts immediately kept quiet. That's right, the moment the Second Palace Lord made her move. They were all enveloped by the tumbling airwaves, and felt as if their bodies and minds were being burned by raging flames. How would they have any energy left to evade the Second Palace Lord's attack? The guests suddenly recalled that when Yi Luo was surrounded by those guards, he only used his speed and agility to evade the guards' encirclement. But towards those guards, he obviously had no way to fight against them. Otherwise he wouldn't have captured Messenger Yen and used him to threaten him, to make those guards leave the Miao tribe. Master Gue Wu said that Yi Luo was Earth Profound 9th grade and was about to step into the Sky Profound realm. Yi Luo wasn't a match for the guards of the Nether Palace. But the second palace lord of the Nether Palace could easily wipe out those guards. Which meant the second palace lord's profound grade was above Yi Luo. In other words, above the Sky Profound realm. Furthermore, it wasn't just the Sky Profound realm. This idea caused an uproar among the guests. Towards the power and strength of the Dark Nether Palace, he was filled with yearning. After all, this other world was a place where the strong ruled and the weak were prey to the strong. Anything that could be explained with fists would never be explained with words. Previously, Yi Luo had been very powerful. The scale of the guests was tipping towards Yi Luo. Now, the Vice Palace Master of Gloomy Palace had appeared. The balance of the crowd immediately tilted towards the Dark Palace. The Assistant Palace Master sensed the respect and reverence the guests had for her. A trace of disdain appeared on her face. She narrowed her mesmerizing eyes and chuckled softly. Although it was separated by a layer of black gauze, one could still vaguely see the outline and lines of the face under the veil. Her smile and frown were extremely charming. These useless trash, I have already settled them, now. Second Palace Lord's gaze slowly shifted onto Yi Qing Luo. As his smile deepened, it's your turn. As the Second Palace Master's voice fell, her eyes, which were originally filled with smiles, at this moment, it suddenly froze into frost. Her arms opened wide as her body floated in midair. Chapter 2761. Light laughter spilled out from Second Palace Lord's mouth, extremely savage and extremely complacent. Suddenly, she raised her arm high up in the air. The surrounding airwaves surged and surged, flying towards the Second Palace Master's raised arm to attack. Kacha! A bolt of lightning tore a huge hole in the inky black sky. Second Palace Lord floated in midair. That torn hole was right behind her. It made her look as though she was an Asura who had crawled out from the entrance of hell. It made one's hair stand on end ineffably. The inky black sky surged. The raging wind brought along a raging wave of energy as it spread majestically across the entire public square. Strong. What powerful energy! Everyone's heart almost stopped beating at this moment. This energy had absolutely surpassed Yi Luo's energy by far. Yi Luo, this young genius young lady, was probably going to die here today. The guests felt some pity in their hearts. After Gu Jingyu sensed that man's powerful energy, his body suddenly turned stiff. You still don't intend to make a move. Miss Yi is not Secluded Palace's Second Palace Lord's opponent. His entire body was tensed up, as though he was suppressing something. Dmo Xian's gaze didn't turn as he stared at Yi Qing Luo's figure without blinking. As though he didn't hear Gu Jingyu's words at all. Gu Jingyu gritted his teeth. This man was wearing a half mask on his face. He couldn't tell the emotions on this man's face at all. Wasn't this man Yi Luo's fiancé? Why was he so indifferent towards Yi Luo's misfortune? Since this fiancé of yours is afraid of death, then don't blame me for interfering in your relationship. Gu Jingyu sensed the Second Palace Lord's profound chi fluctuating and he couldn't bear it any longer. He flicked his sleeves and was about to charge towards Yi Qing Luo's direction. However, a single hand stopped him in his tracks. Zhou Mo raised one hand lazily as his narrow phoenix eyes rose upwards. Young sect master Gu, what are you trying to do? I'm going to save Miss Yi. Gu Jingyu raised his hand and chopped at Zhou Mo's arm. Young Master Mo, please step aside. Anyone with discerning eyes can tell that you have feelings for little Qing Luo. You went to save her. Are you trying to let those people assume that you and little Qing Luo have an affair? Zhou Mo didn't move at all. Gu Jingyu's face sunk and his eyes were filled with ridicule as he shot a glance at Dmo Xian's direction. Yes, this young patriarch admires Miss Yi. Since Lady Ye's fiancé doesn't know how to cherish Lady Yi, then this young master will cherish her. Do you think you're a match for the vice palace master of the secluded palace? Zhou Mo laughed. Cherish. Running to your death and making little Qing Luo feel guilty towards you, remembering you in her heart for the rest of her life. This kind of cherishing. You. Gu Jingyu clenched his fists. This young lord is indeed not the second palace master's opponent, but to have this young lord stand here and watch, this young lord cannot do that. But this young lord will not let you make a move. Zhou Mo smiled elegantly as his arms suddenly hooked around Gu Jingyu's shoulder. Following that, he forcefully pulled Gu Jingyu over to Gue Wu's side. As he walked, he said, "Young sect master Gu, little Qing Luo's fiancé's feelings towards little Qing Luo, you won't understand. Just stand here obediently, don't let little Qing Luo be distracted and drag her down." Gu Jingyu was still struggling, but no matter what, he was unable to break free from Zhou Mo's restraint. Because of this, Gu Jingyu didn't see it. Chapter 2762. His eyes were focused and serious. In his mind, there was a blurry face that he couldn't see clearly. That face was smiling at him. Her coquettish voice seemed to be able to soothe all the bad emotions in his heart. "Ah, Xian, I want to grow up alone. I want to rely on my own strength to stand by your side and walk side by side with you." The girl was smiling. Vaguely, he seemed to see that alluring face. It only took an instant for everything to return to its previous tranquility. Dmo Xian shut his deep eyes. He forcefully suppressed the restlessness that was constantly surging in his heart. He knew that person was Lil Luo'er. Even if their appearances were different. He could also confirm that person was Lil Luo'er. He promised little Luo'er. It would give little Luo'er a chance to grow. He should believe in Lil Luo'er. His little Luo'er would become stronger when meeting strong opponents, and weaker when meeting weak opponents. There was absolutely no problem. However, there was always a voice in his heart that kept floating in his mind. They were clamoring for him to charge forward. Protect his little Luo'er. Protect his Lil Luo'er. He would not let Lil Luo'er be harmed in the slightest. Dmo Xian clenched his fist tightly, as he clenched it even harder. Everyone's attention was gathered on Yi Qing Luo's side. No one noticed it. Dmo Xian's eyes were hidden under the mask. His gaze towards Yi Qing Luo was filled with determination and forbearance. Sometimes, they were infatuated with each other. This was the struggle between the love worm and Dmo Xian's consciousness. Love Gu activated his consciousness. He wanted him to protect Yi Qing Luo unconditionally. Whereas, the memories regarding Yi Qing Luo kept replaying in Dmo Xian's mind. Such a crisscrossing consciousness was activated. This made Dmo Xian's body gradually tensed up. However, no one noticed this. Even if he found out, he would only treat it as worrying about Yi Qing Luo. The other side. Yi Qing Luo raised her head up high and squinted her eyes slightly, looking at the second palace lord who was suspended in midair. The corners of her mouth curled into a teasing smile, revealing a hint of carelessness. It was as if he didn't care about the second palace master at all. But Yi Qing Luo indeed didn't treat the second palace lord as anything. She admitted. The assistant palace master was indeed very strong. Indeed, it was above her profound rank. However, it was not that she was no match for the deputy palace master. just as Dmo Xian had said. She had a physique that grew stronger when encountering the strong and weaker when encountering the weak. The stronger the opponent, only then would her fighting spirit be aroused. The stronger the opponent, only then would she be able to gain actual combat experience and grow. Most importantly, as the saying goes, the connoisseur recognizes the artistry, while the layman enjoys the show. In the eyes of the crowd, the surging waves of terrifying aura of the second palace master were extremely horrifying and intimidating. But, in the eyes of Yi Qing Luo and the other top exponents, that second palace master kept showing off and creating cool, special effects. From the start, it didn't have the slightest bit of actual strength. In the air, layers upon layers of airwaves were constantly surging. Behind the second palace master, the streaks of lightning that had been torn apart continuously converged and spread out bit by bit. The profound qi, at this moment, suddenly expanded. The second palace master's gaze was like a torch as he stared coldly at Yi Qing Luo. His raised arm instantly pointed downwards towards Yi Qing Luo's face. Anyone who dares to offend my secluded palace shall be killed without mercy. The raging waves of profound qi were like huge waves surging as it attacked the biting cold profound qi. At the same time, Yi Qing Luo could clearly feel the surging profound qi blowing towards her face. Chapter 2763. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as the smile on her lips blossomed like a poppy. His eyes were gradually filled with excitement. Her eyes flickered and her entire temperament suddenly changed. She was an elegant and lovely little beauty. At this moment, she had turned into a bloodthirsty and enchanting demon. Her eyes were filled with smiles as she looked at the incoming attack. This time, she had no intention of dodging. Instead, her palms moved and her fingertips danced like a dancing fairy. A red feather fan appeared on her fingertips. Swoosh! The feather fan was opened and the red profound glow lingered around the feather fan. Under the lightning cliff, it gave off an extremely demonic aura. Like a scorching flame, burning continuously. With Yi Qing Luo as the epicenter, the ground started to crack, densely like a spider web as the cracks spread out. All these seemed to have taken quite a bit of effort. In actual fact, it was merely a moment. Bam! Vice Palace Lord's attack landed directly. Dust and thick and terrifying air waves rolled, enveloping Yi Qing Luo's surroundings instantly. It engulfed and covered up everything in the surroundings. Everyone's gazes were fixed on that area which was engulfed by the numerous air waves. One by one, they shook their heads and sighed. Indeed, indeed. Earth Profound 9th grade was after all not comparable to the Sky Mystic Overlord and above. However, with just one move, he had easily taken care of a 9th grade Earth Profound Realm Xian practitioner. The power of the Gloomy Palace was indeed well deserved. Some even felt that if the Vice Palace Lord was so powerful, then the Grand Palace Lord of the Gloomy Palace could be on the same level as the Overlord. No wonder the Gloomy Palace dared to say such words. To be able to surpass the Imperial Palace within a month. Looking at the Gloomy Palace, they could easily annihilate a bunch of powerful guards. Another Earth Profound 9th grade cultivator which Master Ghost Martial Artist had high hopes of. This Gloomy Palace could absolutely surpass the Imperial Palace. Ding! All of a sudden, a crisp sound could be heard. The sound was extremely hurried. Instantly, it attracted everyone's attention. Only to see in that dust and air waves. A bewitching red glow gradually spread out. The boundless air waves rolled like a tide. In just a few breaths' time, he had completely suppressed that powerful air wave. The red light continued to spread. It dispersed the chi wave created by the second palace master. Amidst the red light, the young girl's red dress fluttered in the wind like a blossoming rose, extremely flirtatious. The girl held a burning fan in her hand, and her fingers danced in the air. The fan opened and closed, like a fire elf, flying in the air waves. Clang! There was the sound of things colliding again. Yiqing Luo opened her arms wide. The fan in her hand, unknowingly, had already left Yiqing Luo's hand. It was moving at an extremely fast speed. He broke through the layers of air waves created by the second palace master. It struck a long sword in front of the second palace master. The instant the fan hit the long sword, the sword trembled. The layer of black mist that shrouded the long sword suddenly dispersed. Thump! A heavy object fell to the ground. The long sword fell to the ground. At the same time, the body of the second palace master, who was floating in the air, swayed and unexpectedly fell down uncontrollably. The second palace master's robes fluttered like butterfly wings. The black veil on her face was lifted, revealing half of her face. Yiqing Luo's gaze coincidentally fell on that half of her face. Suddenly, her eyes dimmed and her body froze. That face, was it her illusion? If she didn't remember wrongly. Chapter 2764. Damn it! This unforeseen event caused the assistant palace master's tone to be filled with killing intent. She raised her wrist abruptly. Just as she was about to land on the ground, a thick black fog surrounded her body. His rapidly falling body instantly landed steadily on the ground as light as a feather. She steadied herself and flipped her wrist once again. The long sword on the ground seemed to be sucked by something as it returned to her palm. Second Palace Lord's weapon is just a long sword. The young lady's clear voice was heard from behind. Her hand which was holding the long sword stiffened. Immediately, she turned sideways and tried to escape. But her feet had just started to move. He placed a hand on the second palace master's shoulder. The young lady's extremely melodious voice was heard clearly. Isn't second palace lord going to clear the name of secluded palace? Why did you run away so impatiently the moment you saw me? The young lady was still smiling. That soft and slender fingers which were pinching on her shoulder looked weak and boneless. But she couldn't break free at all. As for the young lady, she didn't move at all. Under Yiqing Luo's strength, the second palace master turned around. She raised her eyes and met with a pair of narrow and devilish eyes. That pair of eyes were as bright as the stars, sparkling brightly. And faintly, there was a glint of flowing light. Just a glance. The second palace master had a feeling as though her soul was being sucked away. It was Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo's seemingly elegant face, but her aura did not diminish at all. The second palace master's heart thumped fiercely. Her mind recalled that person's exhortation in her ear. Be careful, especially towards that lady named Yiqing Luo, you must be on guard. Her ability is not as good as yours, but her potential is terrifying. She thought that in this lower realm, even if she met any genius cultivator, that person could only be considered as a genius from the lower realm. Because of that, she didn't put that person's exhortation to heart. However, at that moment, she seemed to have understood what that person meant. The second palace master's eyes turned slightly cold. She had underestimated her opponent. This time round, she would not give Yiqing Luo any chance to retaliate. A thought flashed across his mind. The vice palace master's expression suddenly became cold and gloomy. At the same time, profound chi surged from the assistant palace master's body. Two streams of profound chi that looked like black fog shot out from her body. Transforming into two rays of profound light, with an irresistible force, it shot towards Yiqing Luo's face, directly piercing downwards. But, the assistant palace master's plan failed again. Just as the second palace master's expression changed, Yiqing Luo had already sensed it. At the moment when the Xian Qi of the second palace master surged wildly, she immediately let go of her hands and moved to a safe place. Yiqing Luo wasn't flustered in the slightest, the expression on her face was calm and tranquil. It was a stark contrast to the Deputy Palace Master's eyes, which were filled with rage. Is the second Palace Lord getting serious? Yiqing Luo's sweet voice was mixed with a slight smile. She looked like the girl next door, pure and innocent. However, the second Palace Master could see it clearly. The young lady's smiling eyes revealed a trace of ridicule. The Vice Palace Master's eyes darkened, her profound chi surged once again, her eyes were aghast as she gave Yiqing Luo a warning stare. Chapter 2765. As she said that, she looked meaningfully at the long sword in Second Palace Lord's hand. Second Palace Lord's eyes were filled with emotions as her bewitching eyes stared widely. How do you know that this weapon isn't my weapon? Yiqing Luo shook her glower flame fan and held it against her lower jaw. The long sword's body is wide and the sword hilt is thick and the surface is stained with too much filthy blood stench. It doesn't look like a lady's weapon. She raised her brows and continued confidently, this long sword should be given to Second Palace Lord by someone who values Second Palace Lord, to protect Second Palace Lord. Earlier, Second Palace Lord was suspended in midair. When she was creating all kinds of powerful pressure. The long sword was firmly placed in front of the Second Palace Master's body. It was because she sensed that the long sword didn't look like Second Palace Lord's weapon. That was why Yiqing Luo directly struck down that long sword. As expected. Just as she had guessed. This Second Palace Lord was the source of most of the profound energy. It was because of that long sword. What an observant young lady. When Second Palace Lord heard that, she didn't continue to refute. She sneered as she placed the long sword on her body and spoke coldly, "Young lady, since you're looking for death, I shall fulfill your wish." Her words had just ended. Second Palace Lord opened her fingers. A long whip with 9 segments appeared in her hand. The surrounding guests all sucked in a breath of cold air when they saw that long whip clearly. On that long whip, there was a tide of black fog which kept surging. Faintly, there was a flash of lightning like flowing light. It gave out a hissing sound. Was that a long whip or a poisonous snake? No matter how the crowd looked, they couldn't see clearly what the soft object under the fog was. When Yiqing Luo saw Second Palace Lord's weapon, her expression dimmed slightly as the serene look in her eyes turned deeper. Long whip. It was indeed a long whip. She didn't see it wrongly. This Second Palace Lord's face. Yiqing Luo stared at the layer of black veil on Second Palace Lord's face. Her gaze was burning as though it was burning. Second Palace Lord was distracted by Yiqing Luo's presumptuous gaze. She clenched the long whip tightly as the black qi lingered around it and struck directly. A powerful wave of qi swept out. The surging waves once again filled the air. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a sneer as she casually played with the glower flame fan in her hands. The moment the Second Palace Master's attack landed, Yiqing Luo's figure swayed. The two sides clashed. This time round, Yiqing Luo didn't adopt any battle tactics. Instead, he faced the Assistant Palace Master head-on. Powerful airwaves constantly rolled in the air. The sky that was as dark as ink was covered densely with dark clouds at this moment, and it was mixed with lightning and thunder, causing the atmosphere to be extremely strange. Over here, the battle was in full swing. On the other side, it was completely impossible to see the silhouettes of both parties clearly, and they could only feel the vast and boundless profound energy. At this moment, the guests, who were bursting forth and rolling about, were in an uproar. A guest pointed at the two people fighting, his face full of disbelief. "Did I see wrongly? Just now I saw." Glowing flame fan. That woman called Yi Luo has the gourd flame fan. Gourd flame fan. Isn't that the weapon used by that young hero of the Western continent? Gourd flame fan. There seems to be only one in this world. Why is it in Yi Luo's hands? The appearance of the gourd flame fan aroused the suspicions of numerous guests. Chapter 2766. Most of the people in Nirvana realm knew about Yi Qing Luo's deeds. Naturally, they knew about Yi Qing Luo's exclusive weapon. Suddenly, the guests thought of something as they exclaimed, Yi Luo. Yi Qing Luo. The overlord has publicly acknowledged the future mistress of the imperial palace, dressed in red, devastatingly beautiful. Overlord. Red. Yi Luo, Yi Luo, Yi Qing Luo. The guests at this moment in their minds regrouped all these symbols together. Everything indicated. The lady named Yi Luo in front of them was the little hero of the West Continent, Yi Qing Luo. And only Yi Qing Luo could possess the only glower flame fan in the world. And only Yi Qing Luo could get so much attention from the overlord. And only Yi Qing Luo, at such a young age, her profound grade had already broken through the sky profound stage, becoming the only one in Nirvana realm at such a young age, to step into the sky profound stage. Not earth profound 9th grade. But sky profound supreme. She is Yi Qing Luo. The Yi Qing Luo who is known as the female version of the overlord. Suddenly, among the guests, a sharp female voice was heard. Only to see a slender figure in a cloak, covering her face, suddenly stood up and stared at the two people who were entangled with each other. Her tone was filled with disbelief. On the side, a figure in the same cloak grabbed the arm of the lady in front and shook it anxiously. The lady in front turned her head to look at the lady behind her, and impatiently shook her hand away. That lady staggered and fell onto the ground. The surrounding was a long table. The lady's head directly hit the long table when she fell. A loud dong sound was heard. It was extremely loud. When the crowd heard it, they felt a pain in their head. But unfortunately, that lady rubbed her forehead and stood up without a word. Not even a cry of pain was made. The lady in front didn't feel guilty because of her own actions. The wide black cloak covered her expression. Only to hear her slightly hoarse voice, sharp and ear-piercing, how could she be Yi Qing Luo? Impossible. She is obviously a lowly student. The guests only felt that this voice sounded extremely familiar. But at this moment, they couldn't recall. The guests sitting next to the woman suddenly looked at each other. Then, they stood up at the same time and rushed toward the woman who was rubbing her forehead. The woman was caught off guard and her hands were tightly held by the two guests. The guest raised his hand and lifted the woman's cloak. Under the cloak, a small and delicate face was revealed. The expressions of the two guests suddenly changed. Princess Bailon. Wasn't this woman the Northern Wave Continent's princess, Xiao Lingling? Why was Xiao Lingling here? Wasn't the Northern Wave imperial family in imminent danger? Xiao Lingling's position as the princess was already in jeopardy. How could Xiao Lingling appear here? Wait, this is Xiao Lingling. Then, who was that sharp-tongued lady? When the woman saw that Xiao Lingling's face had been exposed, she cursed softly, "Trash." He quickly turned around, intending to leave. However, the crowd who had already found out about Yi Qing Luo's true identity. He couldn't wait to find a chance to curry favor with Yi Qing Luo. How could they possibly let off that lady who obviously had enmity with Yi Qing Luo? Immediately, a few guests swarmed up and held that woman down, lifting the black cloak. That person, wasn't she East Wave's young princess, Lan Ling Nuo? Chapter 2767. After Lan Ling Nuo was discovered, her expression instantly became somewhat ugly. She bit her lower lip tightly. The surrounding people were sizing her up with gazes which made her feel extremely embarrassed. But both her hands were restrained by the guests, so there was no way for her to struggle. Xiao Lingling made a nasal sound towards Lan Ling Nuo's direction. Her eyes were filled with fear and uneasiness. The crowd then recalled. Xiao Lingling's tongue had already been plucked out by the overlord. So it's these two young princes who are about to become commoners. Ha ha ha, do you feel especially slapped on the face? Some of them had long disliked these two princesses' way of doing things, and now that they had the chance, they couldn't help but ridicule them. Previously I always felt that no matter if it was status, ability, or looks, I'm much stronger than Miss Yi. But now... Ha ha ha, Miss Yi is the little hero of the West Continent, a genius with outstanding ability. Ha ha ha. The crowd roared with laughter. But they had long forgotten about it. Before this, their own, Lan Ling Nuo and Xiao Lingling's attitude towards Yiqing Luo was no different. Just as the crowd was making a ruckus, a low and sullen voice, like 1,000 caddy-lead brick, fell heavily on everyone's hearts, pressuring them till they couldn't breathe. Shut up. It was just two simple words. The laughter and clamor stopped abruptly. The crowd turned their gazes towards the man who spoke out. His tall figure was tall and towering. Under the half-gold-rimmed mask, two eyes that were as deep as a lake seemed to be condensed with layers of frost. This was Yiqing Luo's fiancé. No, Yiqing Luo's fiancé. Wasn't he the overlord? This man was the overlord. The crowd's hearts suddenly felt a suffocating feeling. All the words were stuck in their throats. They didn't dare to make any noise. After all, Yiqing Luo was still in a life-and-death struggle with the second palace lord of secluded palace. The overlord's emotions were definitely unstable. If they made any noise and touched Yiqing Luo's bad luck, they would definitely be punished by the overlord. After a few big moves clashed against the moves, Yiqing Luo and Vice Palace Lord both retreated backwards. Because of the collision of the two's profound energies, the entire plaza's ground had already cracked open into pieces. The ground was full of holes and gravel. The raised platform and the flags fell to the ground. No matter how the two of them fought, it didn't even affect the guests. Second Palace Master retracted his long whip. His eyes were sinister as if he was dipped in poison, ruthlessly cutting Yiqing Luo's body. You really have some skills. Yiqing Luo's fingertips flicked as she played with the glower flame fan. Her jade-white fingers fused with the raging flames. In the eyes of others, Yiqing Luo was like a fairy who controlled the flames, noble and mysterious. Chapter 2768. Second Palace Lord's brows creased even tighter. The eyes under the veil looked at Yiqing Luo in bewilderment. She seemed to be pondering whether Yiqing Luo's actions were some kind of scheme, trying to lure her into a trap. Second Palace Lord's silence. Yiqing Luo saw it all. She could clearly see the unfamiliarity in Second Palace Lord's eyes. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips and paused for a moment. Wait, are you sure you don't recognize me? After she finished her words, she raised her slender fingers and caressed her face. Her fingers were tapping and exploring her face at an extremely fast speed. In just a moment, an extremely thin layer of something, like a water droplet, rolled on her palm. That is indeed, it's Yiqing Luo. Heavens! Indeed, as the rumors described, a red robe that could topple the world. This is simply able to topple all living things. I will not say that the rumors are fake anymore. The moment Yiqing Luo's thin mask was removed, the surrounding guests immediately burst into an uproar. It wasn't that they hadn't seen a beauty before, but they had never seen such an exquisite, enchanting beauty. Plus, the beauty was noble and elegant, with an unattainable temperament. What's more, once people's gazes landed on her, they couldn't take their eyes off her. The young lady's skin was crystal clear, as fair as snow. Especially that exquisite picturesque face. Devastatingly beautiful, peerlessly enchanting. Slender eyebrows, dazzling eyes. So beautiful that it made one suffocate. The guests exclaimed one after another. To tell the truth, when they saw East Billow's young princess, Lan Ling Nua, they really felt that Lan Ling Nua deserved the title of East Billow's #1 beauty. But now that they had seen Yiqing Luo's real face, Lan Ling Nua's so-called #1 beauty title was simply a slap on the face. Compared to Yiqing Luo, the difference was not just 1 or 2 points. And when Yiqing Luo's face was revealed, Xiao Lingling and Lan Ling Nua, who were restrained by the guests, immediately had a change of expression. Lan Ling Nua's struggle was forgotten. Her pair of beautiful eyes seemed to be coated with poison as she stared fiercely at Yiqing Luo's direction. Impossible. How could this be possible? That ugly girl, how could she be Yiqing Luo? This must be fake. You're all lying to me. Lan Ling Nua couldn't accept this and roared in anger. Xiao Lingling's eyes widened in astonishment. Her body, which was held by the guests, began to tremble slightly. She could not speak. But the frantic shaking of her head showed that she was the same as Lan Ling Nua, unable to believe everything that was happening before her eyes. Whereas for Yiqing Luo, towards the guests' reactions, she had no reaction at all. She put the skin back into the profound phoenix ring. Shortly after, she placed her finger on her chin and fixed her charming eyes on the second palace master. Now, do you recognize it? The second palace master's tightly knitted eyebrows had already formed several wrinkles. Second palace lord looked at Yiqing Luo's devastatingly beautiful face. There wasn't a single bit of shock or hatred in her eyes which Yiqing Luo had expected. Gradually, a layer of vigilance appeared in the eyes of the second palace master. He asked doubtfully, "Who are you? Why should this consort recognize you?" The look in the vice palace master's eyes and her unfamiliar tone of voice. This made Yiqing Luo restrain the emotions in her eyes. Had she seen wrongly earlier? Or this so-called second palace master had lost her memory? If the second palace master was really that person. At the moment she saw her. Chapter 2769. However, just now, when the second palace master's veil flew up, it landed on Yiqing Luo's face. But it was clearly imprinted in her mind. That face had been in her memory for more than 10 years, how could he be mistaken? Yiqing Luo pursed her pink lips, her eyes congealed slightly as she asked word by word, are you Yiqing Qian? He had seen the face of the deputy palace master from the very beginning. It was no different from Yiqing Qian's face. That was why she had noticed the weapon used by the second palace master. Then, he forced the second palace master to reveal her true weapon, the long whip. Yiqing Qian's weapon was a long whip. This made Yiqing Luo even more certain of the second palace lord's identity. However, she took off her human skin and revealed her true appearance. The deputy palace master's reaction made her doubt her own conjecture. Yiqing Qian. The second palace lord murmured this name softly, without any other emotions in his eyes. Obviously, the second palace master was also unfamiliar with this name. Could it be, second palace lord really wasn't Yiqing Qian? Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased even tighter. In his mind, he kept recalling the last time he saw Yiqing Qian. In her memory, Yiqing Qian was fed a pill by her to hang on to her life. Then, she beat him into a meat patty. Her face was completely ruined. His body had also become a pile of rotten meat. In the end, the wolf saint technique gave up. The effect of the medicine could only last for a few hours at most. Once the effect of the drug wore off, Yiqing Qian would rot and die in agony. However, the second palace master in front of him, regardless of appearance or figure. She was no different from Yi Qing Jian. What was going on? Little girl, I don't have time to waste on you. Don't think of any roundabout schemes, I won't fall for it. Vice Palace Master's hair stood on end from Yi Qing Luo's gaze. After the goosebumps, it was followed by the frustration of being humiliated. The second Palace Master's long whip moved, and his profound energy surged, once again setting off raging waves. Profound chi that caused one's heart to palpitate swept out like a tide. The airwaves lingering in the air were also rolling more and more violently. Yi Qing Luo's reaction was swift, at the instant when the second Palace Master made his move. She moved quickly. A glimmer of light flickered in her charming eyes. With a flick of her fingers, the glowing flame fan unfurled itself from her fingertips. Carrying a profound energy that could contend against the second Palace Master, she directly welcomed the attack. Meanwhile, Yi Qing Luo's feet floated swiftly. His movement technique, which had been fused with the teleportation secret art, was unleashed to its fullest in this instant. In the blink of an eye, Second Palace Lord's long whip had just collided with Yi Qing Luo's profound chi. The sound of air currents rippling could be heard. The second Palace Master's expression changed as he realized something. She retracted her whip and quickly retreated. However, even if the second Palace Master's reaction speed was already godlike, it was still not enough. However, he was still a step too late. Just as the second Palace Master retreated, a red figure followed like a shadow into the eyes of the assistant Palace Master. The girl's pink lips curled up slightly, and there was a trace of unknown emotion in her eyes. She held out her hand. Her slender fair fingers tugged on the second Palace Master's black veil. The young girl's pink lips moved slightly, and using a voice that only the two of them could hear, she said, although, second Palace Master's performance made me feel that I might have seen wrongly. But, if I don't confirm it with my own eyes, I'm afraid I won't be able to be at ease. Presumptuous. The second Palace Master's eyes widened, as she raised her hand and slapped down on the young girl's shoulder. But Yi Qing Luo laughed softly. Chapter 2770. At the same time. Under her feet, a complicated footwork was displayed at this moment. Second Palace Lord's palm wind barely brushed past Yi Qing Luo's shoulder and hit the ground. And, the black veil on second Palace Lord's face was pulled down by Yi Qing Luo. That veil was fixed to second Palace Lord's hair. Yi Qing Luo's pull. She also pulled the hairpin fixed to second Palace Lord's hair. A head of black hair, scattered messily. Like ink, pouring behind her. Without the black veil covering her face, it was revealed in Yi Qing Luo's eyes. The woman's face was exquisite, a pair of captivating eyes, slightly raised, giving a very seductive arc, small and straight nose. Bright red lips, revealing a tempting luster. This face. It was indeed Yi Qing Qian's face. Exactly the same facial features, not a single bit different. But it felt like something was different. For example, temperament. Like feeling. As compared to the previous Yi Qing Qian. This face was more captivating. In the most straightforward words, it was. The previous Yi Qing Qian, even if she was smiling, flirtatious and flirtatious. In other people's eyes, this was indeed very beautiful. But beauty was only that for a moment. Once it was over, it would be thrown to the back of one's mind. But the current Yi Qing Qian was different. The current Yi Qing Qian had a kind of extremely seductive temperament. The entire person was like a fox spirit, transforming into a human. Every move, every smile and every frown. Both of them exuded a kind of unforgettable charm that would be engraved in one's heart. This person was Yi Qing Qian, but also not Yi Qing Qian. Yiqing Luo stared at Second Palace Lord's face, her half-squinted eyes had some fluctuations. At the guest seating, numerous people also saw Second Palace Lord's face. One must know, Yiqing Qian's identity was the eldest miss of Three Springs sect. Although Yiqing Luo took over the position of young sect master. But, in the entire Nirvana realm, who didn't treat Yiqing Qian as the next Three Springs sect master? Because of this, Yiqing Qian represented the Yi family, attending many banquets. Her portrait was also circulated in Nirvana realm. Naturally, many people recognized her. Immediately, they couldn't help but shout out, Yiqing Qian. This name, which could be considered familiar, became a hot topic among the guests. The Second Palace Master's ashen face gradually turned uglier and uglier as he listened to the discussions around him. An indescribable emotion surged in her beautiful eyes. Gradually, she raised her hand and touched her face. From her mouth, she lightly spat out 3 words, Yi, Qing, Qian. As his voice fell, the Second Palace Master clenched his fists and a strange sneer appeared on his face. She kept her whip and turned around, walking towards the direction of the sedan. Take them, let's go. The Second Palace Master lifted the black veil and sat in the sedan. The 4 beautiful maids each grabbed Mei, Yan Zhenfei, Sun Yutong, and the others, then lifted the palanquin and flew away. Yiqing Luo stood at her original spot, with no intention to stop him. They watched as the Second Palace Master's palanquin disappeared into the ink-black sky. The cold and charming voice of the Vice Palace Master came with the wind. Little girl, don't celebrate too early. The Palace of Darkness will take revenge for your offense. The wind stopped. The voice dissipated. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she kept her glower flame fan. Just as she was about to return to Dmo Xian's side, she hadn't even turned around. A strong and powerful arm had already encircled her waist. Chapter 2771. Yiqing Luo's eyes were filled with a smile as she turned around and her arms circled around the person behind her, Xian. His arms tightened around her waist. It was very powerful. It was as if he wanted to rub her delicate body into his. Yiqing Luo had just turned around and was only able to call out his name. The man's overbearing and forceful kiss drowned out all sounds. He kissed her very hard. It was different from the gentleness and cautiousness from before. Instead, it was a kind of ferocity that was close to that of a wild beast, as if it wanted to swallow her whole. Yiqing Luo's breathing was almost swallowed by him. The mask on the man's face was somewhat enchanting. Yiqing Luo's mind went blank for a moment. Her hands gripped the man's collar tightly. In the end, he had almost no strength left. She could only rely on Dmo Xian's arm to support her body. Perhaps it was because Dmo Xian's kiss was too intense. Perhaps it was because they were in public, and there were at least 700 or 800 people watching from the side. Yiqing Luo's face was extremely red. The reaction was also very strong. Finally, after this kiss, Dmo Xian let her off when he saw that she was out of breath. However, his arms were still tightly wrapped around her. Ah, Xian. Her voice sounded a little broken because of her panting, and it was extremely flirtatious. Dmo Xian's body tensed up as he increased the strength of his arms and his warm breath heavily sprayed onto the skin beside her ear. Lil Luo, I did it. I did it. His voice was hoarse. It was as if he was restraining some kind of emotion. He restrained himself for a long, long time. He kept murmuring these 4 words. Yiqing Luo didn't quite understand what Dmo Xian meant. But she could also feel the ups and downs of Dmo Xian's emotions. She wrapped her arms around his waist. Her gentle voice comforted him. Dmo Xian placed his head on her shoulder. Lil Luo, I promised you that I would give you the chance to grow, to give you the chance to walk side by side with me. I did it. I didn't stop you from growing." The man's light words fell into Yi-Ching Luo's ears. She felt as if something had touched her heart fiercely. Her eyes became misty. She tightened her grip, raised her head, and said with trembling lips, You remember. I know, the face in my mind, is you. Dmo Xian gazed deeply at the devastatingly beautiful face in front of him, filled with certainty. After Yi-Ching Luo heard that, the touch in her heart grew deeper. Her hand moved from his waist to his face. Her slender fingers gently cupped his face. Even if it was covered by half a mask, he was still as peerless as ever. Her fingers trembled slightly. Her charming eyes reflected a man's face. Her Xian did not remember the past. Xian was poisoned by the love goo. Xian, who cared about her wholeheartedly. Even in such a dangerous situation earlier, he did not make a move. Just because, he had promised her before. Yi-Ching Luo could almost imagine, Xian, who had been poisoned by the love goo, had to use a lot of willpower to restrain the love goo. Yi-Ching Luo's nose felt a little sour. Her curly long lashes were stained with some moisture. Her pink lips rose slightly, as she cupped Dmo Xian's face. Bit by bit, she tiptoed and kissed his lips. Between her lips, a young lady's soft murmur drifted into his ear. Chapter 2772. The man's heart had been disturbed by the young lady's kiss. He heard the young lady's murmuring confession again. His body suddenly tensed up. Every piece of muscle, smooth lines. Yi-Ching Luo nestled in his arms. Naturally she could feel the changes in the man's body. She raised her brows slightly and raised her head. Then she saw the man's pair of overjoyed eyes. It wasn't hard to tell that the man's face under the mask was overjoyed and had a dazed expression. She had confessed her love to Dmo Xian quite a number of times. But this was the first time she confessed to the man who had been poisoned by the love goo, whose mind was only filled with her. Yi-Ching Luo's eyes curved into a smile. The long and narrow arc was full of charm. She hooked the man's collar with one hand and her laughter was tainted with some evilness. Xian, I'm already so direct, don't tell me, you're not going to give me any response. The man seemed to have awoken from his dream as his peach blossom eyes fixed on her face. He still had a dazed look. Yi-Ching Luo smiled again. Dmo Xian opened his thin lips as his peach blossom eyes were filled with joy. I love little Luo the most. The words were at the tip of his tongue. Suddenly, it stopped abruptly. Dmo Xian's pupils constricted fiercely. A strange emotion surged up in his eyes. Yi-Ching Luo's smile instantly froze on her face. This was the omen of the centrifugal force goo acting up. What was going on? Why did the centrifugal force goo suddenly act up? Yi-Ching Luo's heart sank instantly. Lass Luo, he has the centrifugal force goo in his body and you still want to arouse his love for you. The centrifugal force goo will naturally not be happy. Old man Song's helpless voice was heard in her mind. The main purpose of the centrifugal force goo is to drive the overlord and you apart, to let him kill you personally. Just now, Di-Zun recalled his past with you in the form of the love goo. The battle between the consciousness of his main body and the love goo has consumed most of his energy. Now, you've made him love you even more. Yi-Ching Luo, she was just touched, just agitated, couldn't help but want to be intimate with his Xian. Was this wrong? Little girl, now is not the time to talk about right and wrong. Old man Song interrupted Yi-Ching Luo's thoughts. This is the Miao tribe's Saintess selection ceremony and numerous guests are watching from the side. What you should consider is how to restrain the venerable overlord of the centrifugal worm. Don't let others see the abnormality of the venerable overlord. Old man Song's reminder made Yi-Ching Luo's heart sink. Right, there were so many guests around, especially in the Miao tribe's territory. Once the news of Dmo Xian being poisoned was spread out, not only would Dmo Xian suffer from a large-scale attack, the gloomy palace would definitely make use of this opportunity to make the arch palace fall and rise. Yi Qing Luo clenched her fists tightly when she saw Dmo Xian's pair of warm and affectionate peach blossom eyes, gradually turning into an unfamiliar icy chill. She abruptly raised her hand and hooked onto Dmo Xian's neck. Dmo Xian had just switched modes and had yet to react. She directly kissed his lips. Moreover, the kiss was very forceful. Dmo Xian's muffled groan could be heard faintly. It was obvious that his lips were broken. Yi Qing Luo didn't bother about it as her other hand hooked onto his neck. Dmo Xian's brows creased as he raised his hand and wanted to send this audacious young lady flying. But when his gaze fell onto that alluring face, his hand paused slightly. The delicate soft body that was forcefully stuffed tightly clung onto his body. The young lady's fragrance seeped into his nose. Chapter 2773. This alluring face was very unfamiliar. But Dmo Xian felt that it was familiar. In his mind, he automatically overlapped this face with the bold lady who had been rude to him several times before. This was Yi Luo. Dmo Xian's eyes flickered slightly, his arm was about to move. The young lady's hand wrapped around his body, as if soft and boneless, hanging on his body softly. The young lady's lips were a little distance away from him. Vaguely, a trace of crystal could be seen. Yi Qing Luo raised her eyes, her long and narrow eyes, deliberately dyed with a trace of poppy-like charm, smiled wickedly. "Overlord, let's talk about a deal, how about it?" The young lady's fragrance, like orchid, blended with his breath. Dmo Xian faintly felt that his heart was spreading some kind of emotion, constantly gnawing at his heart. Trying to avoid this complicated emotion. Trying to push the young lady away. But the young lady came closer again. Their lips were almost touching. The young lady's enchanting eyebrows became more and more soul-stirring. That pair of glistening eyes, the rays of light flowed, sparkling. Just looking into her eyes, it was as if he had sunk into her charm. Unable to extricate himself, and unable to control himself, Dmo Xian's eyes deepened. This woman was really an evildoer. An evildoer who bewitched people, bewitched the masses. There had never been anyone, like her, who could affect his emotions, his thoughts. But, as she was able to break his taboo time and time again. This feeling of being affected by a woman, his emotions. It really made him unhappy. Dmo Xian's eyes deepened. As if he was pondering about something. Or as if he was quietly looking at something. The man's eyes were very deep, very dark. Just looking at his eyes, there was no way to tell what kind of mood he had at this moment. But, even if she couldn't see his peerless beauty in full view, but just staring at his eyes, looking at his smooth lines, smooth chin, and that, as if tempting her to kiss his thin lips. It was also a delightful thing to see. Probably because Yi Qing Luo's naked eyes stared a little too much. The man's long and narrow peach blossom eyes slightly raised a little. He chuckled. Their lips were almost touching, and she could feel his breath. Yi Qing Luo's cheeks turned slightly red. However, her expression was still as charming as before. "What kind of deal? Tell me about it." Dmo Xian's eyes deepened and his voice was filled with ridicule. Seeing that the man had a reaction, Yi Qing Luo moved her lips away and whispered into his ear, "Accompany me until the end of the ceremony." "Accompany you?" Dmo Xian's peach blossom eyes curved as the corners of his mouth curled up, becoming more and more playful. Yiqing Luo expressed that looking at a half-covered beauty at such a close distance was really a test of her self-control. There was a smile in her voice. Yes. What are the benefits? Dmo Xian didn't accept, but he didn't reject either. Asking like this meant that there was a chance. Yiqing Luo's eyes lit up slightly as her voice hooked out a tinge of coquettishness. After this ends, I'll be at your disposal, you can do whatever you want to me. Anything. Dmo Xian repeated these 4 words with a smile which didn't look like a smile. His eyes looked at her and suddenly lowered his voice. A little rascal, including, sleeping with you. Yiqing Luo was stunned. She didn't expect such a serious Dmo Xian to say such rascal words. Her charming eyes rose, meeting Dmo Xian's peach blossom eyes which were filled with ridicule. Chapter 2774. Looks like you really like me. Dmo Xian's voice was extremely light, without any extra emotions. Yiqing Luo expressed that this Dmo Xian looked like an abstinent male god. An inviolable look. She smiled with her eyes curved, seemingly very happy. Yes, I like you very much. The young lady didn't conceal her loving gaze. This made Dmo Xian's thin lips inexplicably pulled into an arc. But the next moment, there was another inexplicable emotion that began to disturb his heart. There was a voice in his mind. It kept telling him, push away the young lady. Stay away from the young lady. Gradually, it formed a very powerful thought. Kill the young lady. His brows tightened, feeling a little strange about this inexplicable emotion. Obviously, he was hugging the young lady. Flirting with the young lady. Under this kind of atmosphere, it was impossible to have the thought of killing the young lady. But this kind of thought really existed. His body had a strange feeling. Dmo Xian's peach blossom eyes flashed a trace of fluctuation. He once again fixed his gaze on Yiqing Luo. He wanted to find an answer from Yiqing Luo. The young lady was still smiling. A pair of sparkling eyes, as if bearing thousands of peach blossoms. Reflected in her eyes was only his shadow. For some reason, Dmo Xian had already abandoned the strange emotion in his heart. His thin lips moved, spitting out a word, all right. As soon as he said that word, a cold light flashed in his eyes. The smile on the young lady's face became even more brilliant. Like a blooming poppy, releasing its most seductive power. Dmo Xian's mind moved. Suddenly his big palm covered the back of Yiqing Luo's head, lowered his head, and kissed her lips. This kiss was very affectionate. Gentle, as if water could be squeezed out. Yiqing Luo almost indulged in this kind of torturous kiss. But Dmo Xian only kissed familiarity, until his breath covered her layer after layer. He released her. Yiqing Luo's eyes were stained with a trace of crystal, because of his kiss. He let go. Yiqing Luo's thoughts were still empty, as she grabbed Dmo Xian's collar. Staring at Yiqing Luo, the man's eyes dimmed slightly, covered with a layer of desire. What a lovely little vixen. He really wanted to devour her bite by bite. However, the timing and location were both wrong. Thinking of the young girl's cunning, he smiled charmingly and said, including sleeping with me. Dmo Xian's expression darkened further. Forget it, since the girl wanted him to accompany her. He accompanied her. Perhaps, after obtaining her, they would feel that she was no different from other women. He wouldn't be affected by this woman anymore. Dmo Xian retracted his breath and tightened his arms, bringing her petite body into his embrace. His low and husky voice moved closer to her ear and laughed. This is the interest. After tasting it, it's not bad. I will reluctantly agree to your deal. Yiqing Luo was still in a daze. He couldn't help but sigh. Dmo Xian's honey trap really made her unable to stop herself. However, at least he had reached an agreement with him. As long as Dmo Xian sat with her properly, and finished participating in this Sainte ceremony, the rest of the matter would be discussed in private. Yiqing Luo hugged his waist and buried her head in his chest. The man didn't resist, nor did he have any intention to push her away. Yiqing Luo was assured, as she hugged Dmo Xian's waist, and walked towards their position. Chapter 2775. No matter if it was Yiqing Luo's real identity, or her real looks. Furthermore, the overlord was present at the scene, and even displayed affection with Yiqing Luo in public, breaking the rumors of abandonment. All kinds of things. All the guests who were watching were shocked. They recalled that they had previously spoken out to humiliate Yiqing Luo, belittling the imperial palace in front of the emissary of the Palace of Darkness and the vice-palace master. Their hearts were in their throats. However, the two people who had disturbed everyone's mind did not seem to be affected at all. N lovingly returned to his seat. He even acted as if there was no one else around, showing off his affection and feeding him food. Naturally it was Yiqing Luo who was feeding Dmo Xian. Peach, who was sitting by the side in a daze, looked at Yiqing Luo's smiling face, peeling grapes for Dmo Xian and feeding him. Her mouth twitched. After not wearing the mask, you can let go of yourself. Just now, when he saw the two of them, the atmosphere was clearly different. His Majesty's aura had also changed. The group of them thought that Lord Dizun was suffering from the effects of the centrifugal goo. He was about to flip out on the spot. He didn't expect to be stuffed with dog food instead. Overlord, he. Xiao Jin held Yan Xiao Yi, whose expression wasn't very good, as he looked at Dmo Xian worriedly. His centrifugal force goo, will it affect? No problem. Yiqing Luo placed the grape into Dmo Xian's mouth. The man sat on the cushion lazily. His feet were slightly bent. One hand rests on the knee. He looked lazy and noble to the extreme. When Yiqing Luo's grape was brought to his lips, he lazily opened his mouth. His thin lips brushed past Yiqing Luo's fingers faintly. Yiqing Luo's fingertips trembled, but she didn't say a word as she continued to peel the grape skin while glancing sideways at Xiao Jin. The overlord has always been honest and trustworthy. He promised me that he will accompany me till the end of the grand ceremony, so he will stay till the end of the grand ceremony. Her words were directed at Xiao Jin. But in actual fact, it was for Dmo Xian to hear. As smart as Dizun was, how could he not understand the deeper meaning of the girl's words? He narrowed his long and narrow eyes. His thin lips curled up into an extremely shallow arc. When the girl gave him another grape, he opened his mouth and bit the girl's finger. A slight prickling pain made Yiqing Luo frown as she stared at him resentfully. Dmo Xian loosened his grip and casually shifted his gaze onto Yiqing Luo's face as he gave a casual smile. This lord is not an honest and trustworthy person. Everything depends on this lord's mood. Yiqing Luo, fine, you're the boss. Couldn't she spoil him to death? Chapter 2776. Dmo Xian raised his brows, puzzled by Yiqing Luo's actions. Was she not going to serve him anymore? Yiqing Luo didn't look at him as she lifted her feet and walked towards a certain direction. Dmo Xian narrowed his peach blossom eyes as he slowly propped himself up. That was where Miao Yi was. At this moment, Miao Yi was standing beside the corpses of the Palace of Darkness guards, calmly commanding the Miao guards to carry the corpses. Second Elder Miao and Fourth Elder Miao stood beside her, their brows tightly furrowed as they spoke to Miao Yi. His emotions seemed to be somewhat agitated. From time to time, Miao Yi would glance sideways and respond to the two elders. Meanwhile, the two elders' faces turned uglier and uglier. He seemed to be arguing with Miao Yi about something. Yi Qing Luo also saw this scene, hence she immediately rushed over. Looking at second elder Miao's fawning attitude towards the Palace of Darkness just now. Later on, the Vice Palace Master of Gloomy Palace appeared. Second elder Miao's heart was probably biased towards the Dark Nether Palace. He might even vent his anger on Miao Yi because of this. Although Miao Yi looked very calm and collected at the moment, and her way of doing things also had her own style. However, Miao Yi was only a 14 or 15-year-old girl after all. Before returning to the Miao tribe, she was still that simple-minded girl who would occasionally reveal a hint of cuteness. Miao Yi had undergone such an earth-shattering change in just a month. Thinking about it, Miao Yi must have had a very hard time in the Miao tribe this month, but Yi Qing Luo didn't intend to care about Miao Yi's hard work for this 1 month. After all, this was the path that Miao Yi had chosen. Become the Miao tribe leader, become the Miao tribe's holy maiden. The pressure on Miao Yi would be even greater than now. The days ahead would only be more difficult than now. These were things that Miao Yi had to bear. Before he even got close to the corpse of the Palace of Darkness guard, second elder Miao's angry voice rang out, "Miao Yi. Since you want to be the leader of the Miao tribe and become the saintess, shouldn't you prioritize the interests of the Miao tribe?" Fourth elder Miao also tried his best to persuade her. "That's right, Miss Miao. You are the only direct descendant of the Miao tribe. Everything in the Miao tribe will belong to you. For the sake of the Miao tribe, it's just a small matter to her. However, this will be of great help to the Miao tribe." "No." Miao Yi spat out the word without hesitation. Her face was cold and gloomy. He was probably annoyed by the two elders' harassment. After saying this, she turned around and was about to return to the waiting room for the selection of the holy maiden. Second elder Miao immediately chased after her. "Miao Yi, what do you want? Whatever conditions you have, just state them." "I don't want anything." Miao Yi halted her footsteps as she decisively rejected, "Second elder Miao, I won't open my mouth to Qing Luo. She's my friend, not a tool to be used. Isn't it normal for friends to help each other?" Second elder Miao was still unwilling to give up. Miao Yi could not be bothered to say anything more to second elder Miao. Suddenly, he heard a sweet voice with a smile, "What are you talking to me about?" Miao Yi was stunned as her gaze turned towards the direction of the voice. She saw that young lady who was clad in raging flames looking at her with a light smile. Miao Yi's heart quivered slightly. Chapter 2777. Oh. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as she had some guesses in her heart, but she still asked, "My matter?" "What matter?" Second elder Miao's attitude made Yi Qing Luo smile, add a tinge of ridicule. These years, status and ability were indeed the most important. Originally she thought that second elder Miao would because of the appearance of the secluded palace's second palace lord. Placing all the bets on secluded palace. She had not expected, second elder Miao was leaning towards her. After knowing her real identity. Trying to get closer to her through Miao Yi. As expected, after hearing Yi Qing Luo's words, second elder Miao gave a flattering smile. "Miss Yi and eldest young Miss Miao have a close relationship, so it's most suitable for eldest young Miss Miao to say it." Saying that, he stretched out his hand and pulled Miao Yi's arm, pushing her in front of Yi Qing Luo. "Eldest young miss, why are you still standing here? Didn't you have something to say to Miss Yi earlier?" Miao Yi's willowy brows creased tightly as she impatiently shook off second elder Miao's hand. "Miao Yi." Second elder Miao warned her in a low voice as he took a careful look at Yi Qing Luo and immediately smiled. "Perhaps my tone earlier was a little too heavy and made eldest young miss unhappy. I'll leave first, Miss Yi and eldest young Miss Miao, you guys continue chatting." Saying that, he nudged fourth elder Miao who was standing by the side. The two of them prepared to leave. What's the matter? Yi Qing Luo looked at Miao Yi's steely green face as she laughed lightly. Between us, what else can't be said? The two elders who were leaving instantly pricked up their ears as they simultaneously slowed down their footsteps. Miao Yi pursed her lips as her expression sunk as she opened her mouth. Sorry. Why are you apologizing? Yi Qing Luo smiled gently. Miao Yi was stunned as she raised her eyes and stared blankly at Yi Qing Luo's alluring exquisite face. Ever since Yi Qing Luo brought her back to the secret room in the Peach Blossom restaurant, Yi Qing Luo had never intentionally concealed her own identity in front of her. From the beginning in the Peach Blossom restaurant's secret room, Miao Yi already knew Yi Luo's real identity. The one who was hailed as the little hero of the West Continent, the one who saved countless of students, the female version of the miracle, Yi Qing Luo. She had heard of Yi Qing Luo's name. He had also envied Yi Qing Luo's ability. There was a time when he had fantasized about it. If only he had half of Yi Qing Luo's boldness and determination. She would not have to leave the Miao tribe, the place that belonged to her. Miao Yi knew of Yi Qing Luo's identity, but she had never asked about it, nor was she curious about it. She knew that Yi Qing Luo treated her as a friend. That was enough. If not for Yi Qing Luo, she would still be wandering outside, unable to return to the place where she belonged. Miao Yi's eyes were a little dazed. His eyes gradually turned red. After a long while, her long eyelashes trembled and she said in a nasal voice, "It's nothing. I just wanted to tell you that I will do my best in this saintess selection." Yi Qing Luo smiled as she raised her hand and rubbed Miao Yi's furry little head. Amen, all the best, I believe in you. Miao Yi's eyes reddened even more as she felt the warmth of a big sister's palm. Since she was young, she had never enjoyed the so-called familial love. The so-called elder sister had never given her any warmth. Today, from Yi Qing Luo's body, she could feel this warmth. Chapter 2778. She closed her cheek, feeling the warm touch. A smile gradually appeared in Miao Yi's eyes. She revealed a smile as she looked at Yi Qing Luo and nodded her head vigorously. Not far away, the two elders who were standing among the Miao tribe guards who were continuously carrying the guards of the Palace of Darkness away saw this scene. They looked at each other and smiled in satisfaction. However, in the next instant, but she saw Miao Yi and Yi Qing Luo saying goodbye and turning around to leave. Second elder Miao's face darkened. He quickly walked over and stopped Miao Yi. "Did you say what you wanted to say? Get out of my way." Miao Yi frowned and tried to pass second elder Miao. However, second elder Miao moved to block Miao Yi and asked again, "Have you said what I asked you to say to Miss Yi?" "No." Miao Yi's voice was very calm, and her emotions did not fluctuate. "Can you move aside now? I still have to prepare for the upcoming saintess selection." Miao Yi. Second elder Miao was infuriated by her attitude and tightened his grip on Miao Yi's slender wrist. "This is all for the good of the Miao tribe. Since you're so close to her, how could she not help you with just a few words?" Miao Yi was getting impatient. The anger in second elder Miao's heart grew. He was about to speak. Behind him, Yi Qing Luo's cold voice floated over, "Second elder Miao, what's going on? Is the dignified young mistress of the Miao tribe someone that a mere elder like you can drag around?" Meanwhile, a dark force hurricane struck. It brushed past second elder Miao's hand, which was holding Miao Yi's hand. Second elder Miao let go of Miao Yi in pain. He raised his hand and saw that the back of his hand was already covered in blood. Just a slight movement of his finger would cause the wound that had been swept by the hurricane to reopen, and the pain was excruciating. However, second elder Miao did not dare to show a dark expression. He endured the pain coming from the back of his hand and smiled, nodding repeatedly. Miss Yi is right. I have overstepped my boundaries. Yiqing Luo raised her brows slightly as she slowly walked over. She placed a hand on Miao Yi's shoulder lazily. He leaned against Miao Yi. Their posture was intimate and natural. She tilted her head and smiled wickedly. Just now, second elder Miao even said that his tone towards Yi was a little harsh and made Yi unhappy. I'm very curious, in this Miao tribe, just how much authority does an elder have? Second elder Miao's body stiffened and his face paled. This. Miss Yi has misunderstood. Misunderstanding. Yiqing Luo's tone rose as her long and narrow eyes squinted. Yi is the Miao clan leader's only direct bloodline, and is the future Miao clan leader. Furthermore, she is currently a candidate for the Holy Maiden of the Miao tribe. She has the protection of the Holy Maiden. How dare you, an elder of the Miao tribe, disrespect Yi? She paused for a moment before her tone suddenly became more serious. You're tugging at Yi, and your attitude is terrible. I can't help but think deeper. Could it be that second elder Miao is trying to take away Yi's authority and replace her? Second elder Miao's face instantly turned pale. He hurriedly shook his head and anxiously explained, I didn't. I've been in the Miao tribe for decades, how could I have such thoughts? Miss Yi, please don't misunderstand. Misunderstanding. Yiqing Luo's smile deepened as her charming eyes deepened. No one could tell the real meaning behind her smile. Obviously, it was a devastatingly beautiful smile. Obviously, it was a pair of alluring eyes that made one's heart flutter. But, second elder Miao was being stared at by this pair of alluring eyes. When this smile was reflected in his eyes, he felt a chill run down his spine. Chapter 2779. Second elder Miao felt a chill run down his spine. Wrinkles spread across his pale face. His body trembled and his voice trembled. It's my fault, I've broken the Miao tribe's rules. Yiqing Luo's fingertip tapped on Miao Yi's shoulder as she opened her mouth lazily. Future clan leader, how do you think we should punish those who break the Miao tribe's regulations? Miao Yi was stunned, not expecting Yiqing Luo to shift the topic to her. But when he met Yiqing Luo's smiling eyes, Miao Yi suddenly understood. Yiqing Luo was helping her to stabilize her position in the Miao tribe. Miao Yi's heart felt warm. This was the first time someone stood in her shoes and considered everything for her. So, Yiqing Luo knew right from the start. Why were second elder Miao and fourth elder Miao pestering her? Second elder Miao's request was actually very simple. She only hoped that she could make use of the friendship between her and Yiqing Luo. Let Yiqing Luo step forward to show the guests that she would stand on the Miao tribe's side, becoming their backing. Because Yiqing Luo not only represented Yiqing Luo. There was also the overlord and the power of the imperial palace. As long as Yiqing Luo agreed. This was very beneficial to the future development of the Miao tribe. At least, those who wanted to take advantage of the Miao tribe's current situation to attack them and invade their territory would give up on that idea. However, Miao Yi didn't want that to happen. Yiqing Luo had helped her enough. Yiqing Luo indeed treated her extremely well, treating her like a younger sister. But she couldn't be insatiable just because Yiqing Luo treated her well. Moreover, it had always been Yiqing Luo who had been sacrificing for her. As for her, she had never done anything for Yiqing Luo. How could she possibly make use of their friendship to make Yiqing Luo open her mouth? The minute Yiqing Luo announced in public, she would become the backing of the Miao tribe. It meant that in the future, he would be involved with the Miao tribe. Miao Yi wasn't willing to push her own burden onto Yiqing Luo. Because of this, Miao Yi had always refused. But now, Yi-Ching Luo used her own way to express her attitude. It wasn't a big publicity. Instead, he used his actions to show it. Yi-Ching Luo was teaching her to punish the chicken to warn the monkey, stabilizing his position in the Miao tribe. It was also a good opportunity to show that she, Miao Yi, was not someone to be trifled with. On Miao Yi's face, the first time she met Yi-Ching Luo surfaced that radiant and innocent smile. Yi-Ching Luo had already helped her to such an extent. Then, she would have to walk on her own, one step at a time. Miao Yi's eyes firmly looked at Yi-Ching Luo. Soon after, the smile on his face slowly disappeared. "I'm afraid Second Elder has been in a high position for far too long," Miao Yi said, her voice icy cold. "You no longer consider yourself to be Second Elder." Second Elder Miao shuddered and knelt in front of Miao Yi with a thud. When Fourth Elder Miao saw this, he immediately knelt down. Miao Yi's expression was calm, without a hint of panic. She looked down at Second Elder Miao and continued, "Nothing can be accomplished without rules. Second Elder Miao should know the Miao tribe's rules better than anyone else. This person who broke the Miao tribe's rules, how to deal with him. Second Elder Miao should be clearer than anyone else. Young miss, spare me, spare me." Chapter 2780. According to the rules, Second Elder Miao offended her superiors and had the intention to replace me. She should be directly stripped of her status as an elder, and sent to the Gu garden to be reduced to a Gu slave. Miao Yi enunciated each and every word in a calm tone. When he heard the words, Gu slave, Second Elder Miao's face was ashen. Gu garden, that was the place where Miao tribe's Gu worms were abundant. As for Gu slaves, it wasn't just to raise those Gu worms. Moreover, every time a new Gu worm was researched, the Gu slave would become the test subject of the Gu worm. If they were lucky, they could survive, and because of the new Gu worm, they could develop the latent energy in their bodies. If he was unlucky, he would be devoured by the new Gu worm. That was the place that all the Miao tribe members feared the most. He looked at Second Elder Miao and Fourth Elder Miao's pale faces. Yi-Ching Luo laughed softly. She tilted her head and leaned against Miao Yi's shoulder. Her voice was extremely lazy. "This punishment is not bad." Miao Yi smiled as well. Her confidence grew as well. She was about to continue speaking. However, the slender and soft fingers on his shoulder suddenly knocked gently. Miao Yi was stunned as she realized that Yi-Ching Luo had something to tell her. She glanced sideways. Yi-Ching Luo didn't say anything, only smiling faintly. There seemed to be some sort of emotion hidden in those deep and beautiful eyes. Miao Yi's eyes narrowed. Suddenly, he seemed to have understood something. She shifted her gaze again, and when she looked at Second Elder Miao, the flames on her body had already gradually calmed down. She lowered her eyes and looked at the elder kneeling in front of her, but Miao Yi purposely dragged out her last syllable. These two words seemed to give Second Elder Miao hope. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Miao Yi. "However, Second Elder Miao is an elder of the Miao tribe after all. You have worked diligently for the Miao tribe for decades." The corners of Miao Yi's mouth curled into a faint smile. "Seeing that Second Elder Miao has a good attitude in admitting his mistake, I can pretend that your rudeness towards me did not happen. But, if there is a next time, there will be no next time. There would be no next time. There will be no next time." Second Elder Miao's anxious and uneasy heart felt much more at ease the moment he heard Miao Yi's tone. With a pale face, he repeatedly promised that he wouldn't dare to do it again. Miao Yi widened her smile in satisfaction. At this moment, the finger on Miao Yi's shoulder moved again. Shortly after, the soft and delicate body that was attached to Miao Yi's body slowly pulled away. This time, Miao Yi understood without the slightest bit of hesitation. She took the initiative to help the two elders up and said, "Elders, please don't kneel. In the future, the Miao tribe will still need the help of the two of you." A slap in the face, and then a carrot. This was the message that Yiqing Luo transmitted to her. Yiqing Luo was extremely satisfied with Miao Yi's way of doing things. She raised her hand and stroked Miao Yi's head again. The dignified look on Miao Yi's face immediately faded away as she resumed a young lady's radiant smile. She raised her head and looked at Yiqing Luo. "Qing Luo, thank you. All right, hurry up and prepare. We've been delayed by the secluded palace for such a long time. If we drag on any longer, the sky will turn dark." Yiqing Luo placed both her hands on Miao Yi's shoulder, pushing her towards the direction of the Miao tribe's inner region. Chapter 2781. Miao Main Building. In the long corridor on the second floor, stood two figures. This position coincidentally allowed them to have a panoramic view of the entire plaza. Standing slightly in front was a lady dressed in simple Miao Miao clothing. Her facial features were exquisite and gentle like water. There were some wrinkles at the corner of her eyes and she looked to be around 30 years old. The lady's gaze followed Miao Yi closely until Miao Yi's figure disappeared around the corner before she retracted her gaze. The lady's delicate brows creased. "Eldest young Miss Miao's change is really huge." Behind the lady was an elderly dressed in a white long robe. He had white brows, white hair and a white beard. His figure was slightly plump and he looked very benevolent. The elderly stroked his white beard. "This is all because of that young lady named Yiqing Luo who changed eldest young Miss Miao." He paused for a moment as his white brows curved, filled with smiles. "Eldest young Miss Miao being able to grow up is a good thing for the Miao tribe." The lady remained silent for a moment as she nodded her head faintly. Soon after, his gaze was fixed on the extremely dazzling young girl with a face that could topple cities. After some time, her red lips moved slightly as she spoke softly. "Let's go, the sacred maiden selection is about to begin. We should go meet this lady who can change eldest young Miss Miao. Let's see how much magical power she has." Miao Tribe Plaza. Yiqing Luo sent Miao Yi off with her eyes. She then took small steps back to Dmo Xian's side. She had just gotten close when she sensed that there was a kind of frosty cold air flowing in the air. Yiqing Luo's footsteps paused as she looked at Dmo Xian, who was still maintaining his original sitting posture. That half mask which she personally made had concealed the emotions on his face. But Yiqing Luo acutely sensed the chilliness emitting from Dmo Xian's body. He was in a bad mood. Who was it who had offended this great Buddha? Yiqing Luo looked suspiciously at the few people beside Dmo Xian. The few people who had been sitting next to her before she left her seat had now all obediently moved away from her and moved to the side. On the left and right, there was at least a space of 3 seats. Only the overlord was left as he bent his knees on the soft cushion, displaying his elegance. Peach and Xiao Jin, who came into contact with Yiqing Luo's puzzled gaze, spread out their hands as they shrugged their shoulders in confusion. Just as Yiqing Luo and Peach's eyes met, transmitting the message. Suddenly, the man's cold and deep voice came into her ears. "Why are you still standing there?" Yiqing Luo shivered in fright from this voice. Her fingers unconsciously curled up a little. Earlier when he was in front of Miao Yi, whatever overbearing aura, indolent enchanting, in front of Dmo Xian, had all disappeared. She laughed dryly as she moved her feet and returned to Dmo Xian's side to sit down. Not waiting for Dmo Xian to speak. She had already spontaneously put her head into Dmo Xian's arms. The man's aura was very cold. But his embrace was still very warm. "What? Now that you know you're in the wrong, you're here to please me?" The man lowered his eyes and asked with a sneer. Yi Qing Luo arched her head, the man's sandalwood scent lingered around her nose. She stretched out her arms and hugged his waist. In his arms, she raised her little head and smiled like a cat who had successfully stolen food. Wrong. Fawn. I'm the one who made the overlord unhappy. Dmo Xian's pupils contracted slightly. Not knowing why, when he saw the young lady's satisfied smile. His heart had a long-lost warmth. Chapter 2782. The young lady didn't know Dmo Xian's emotions were in turmoil. Her brows were still curved as she smiled sweetly and her voice was soft as though water could be squeezed out. I wonder what I did to make the overlord angry. Dmo Xian's eyes were slightly gloomy as he stared at her quietly, as though he wanted to stare into her soul. Yi Qing Luo smiled even more wantonly. Her hands were also on Dmo Xian's waist, moving up and down, constantly taking advantage of him. There was no sign of her admitting her mistake and trying to please him. Yi Qing Luo. Suddenly, Dmo Xian's large palm clasped onto the little hand that was caressing his waist. His pupils were deep. In public, if you don't want to put on a show, then let go. Yi Qing Luo's hand paused as the complacent expression on her face disappeared. Damn it. While Dmo Xian was poisoned by the centrifugal venom, he definitely wouldn't have that kind of reaction towards her. Touching him all over, touching all the muscles that she didn't dare to touch previously. Because, if it was in the past, she simply wanted to touch Dmo Xian's firm muscles, to feel what it felt like. In the end, there were only two possibilities. It was very likely that not only did she not touch his muscles, she would also be eaten clean without any residue left. Or perhaps, on one hand, she was eaten clean and on the other hand, she was forced to touch his muscles until she was afraid to see his muscles. No matter what the outcome was. Yi Qing Luo expressed that she didn't want to experience it. So, she specially touched him now. Even if Dmo Xian forgot about her and left her heart. But he was after all a man. She couldn't play happily anymore. Yi Qing Luo retracted her hand resentfully, but her mouth was still very thick-skinned. I am trying to please the overlord and admit my mistake. So, Miss Ye's way of admitting your mistake is to sleep with me. Dmo Xian raised his brows as his voice faintly revealed a chill. Yi Qing Luo inexplicably felt a little cold. Even when she was leaning against Dmo Xian's arms. That chill was constantly surging into his skin. Yi Qing Luo's pupils were slightly stunned as she quickly reacted and laughed. She suppressed the lingering cold air around her and her hands were not afraid of death as she hugged Dmo Xian's waist once again. Moreover, it was extremely bold. She reached into his wide silver robe and wrapped her arms around his sturdy waist. Her little face was pressed against his chest. Glancing at Dmo Xian with a faint smile, she gazed at his face. The only person who can make me admit my mistake and coax, is only you, the overlord. The only person I want to sleep with, is only you, the overlord. When she said this, she even deliberately used that extremely coquettish Taiwanese accent. She could be said to be an expert at acting spoiled. Dmo Xian's thin lips were slightly pursed, his gaze deep as he gazed deeply at her face. He did not say a word and his expression was indifferent. This reaction made Yi Qing Luo not know what to do. Could it be that Dmo Xian wasn't jealous? Was he unhappy with the way she apologized and tried to please him? She had made her feelings very clear. What was he still upset about? Yi Qing Luo expressed, a man's heart was even more difficult to fathom than a needle at the bottom of the sea. Stop crying. Lord Dizun is angry. How can I coax him? It was quite urgent. Yi Qing Luo was still racking her brains, thinking of ways to coax her man. Suddenly, a man wearing a mask appeared in her eyes. The man's face was half revealed, and his elegant face was reflected in her eyes. Yiqing Luo was stunned and just wanted to open her mouth. Her lips were forcefully sealed by the man. Chapter 2783. What was going on? Wasn't he angry? Why did he suddenly kiss her? Yiqing Luo's mind was in a mess. She couldn't resist the temptation from Dmo Xian. Very quickly, Yiqing Luo was thrown into disarray. Until she was released, she was lying in Dmo Xian's arms. Her ear was stuck tightly to his heart. Her heart was beating very fast, her mind was filled with the thump-thump-thump sound. But, where her ear was stuck, the heartbeat was extremely calm, without any ripples or waves. As though the kiss earlier was just a casual action, unable to stir up any waves in his heart. Yiqing Luo's thumping heart, at this moment, stopped beating. Her emotions disappeared very quickly. The lady's shyness also disappeared very quickly. This change naturally did not escape Dmo Xian's eyes. The brows under the mask slightly thickened, Dmo Xian's eyes sunk, his voice was still very cold. Why? Tired of this lord's kiss? The world's peerless beauty, only the overlord, how could I be tired of the overlord's kiss? Yiqing Luo's delicate body pulled a distance away from Dmo Xian. She half propped up, only her upper body, leaning into Dmo Xian's arms. 3,000 black hair, pouring down. It looked extremely lazy. She raised her head, 4 eyes, and Dmo Xian, level, looked at each other. The overlord took the initiative to kiss me, does it mean, you have forgiven me? She raised one arm. The wide robe slid down to the wrist. Half of the skin, as white as jade, was revealed, revealing half of the skin, the fair as jade arm. Her hand circled around Dmo Xian's neck, and immediately her delicate body came closer to his arms. The distance between the two of them narrowed again. Almost, it was nose, aimed at nose. But this kind of closeness made Dmo Xian's brows creased even tighter. His eyes dimmed. Although the young lady in front was close to him. But the smile on the young lady's face was obviously too fake. It was just like the mask she wore when she was in front of others. To him, it was no different to others. This kind of thinking made Dmo Xian's heart sink. Obviously, just now, she was still in his arms, soft as water. The more Dmo Xian thought, the more vexed he felt. Such emotions overflowed. It was impossible for Yiqing Luo not to feel it. But Yiqing Luo had no intention to open her mouth. She knew that when Dmo Xian kissed her, other than the man's most direct reaction, he did not have any feelings of love towards her. That was because of the centrifugal force goo in his body. But, even if he knew, while she was being kissed passionately, but he didn't have the slightest reaction. She still felt rather sad. After the selection of the saintess, she must let Yi cure Dmo Xian's poison as soon as possible. You're angry. The man's deep voice floated over. His long arms suddenly reached out and wrapped around her slender waist. Yiqing Luo's half-propped-up body suddenly pounced forward. She fell into his firm embrace. The man's scorching breath hit her in the face. Since you like my kiss, why are you still angry after being kissed? He bent down and touched his nose to hers. Their lips were separated by less than a finger. But he did not kiss her. A pair of sparkling peach blossom eyes stared deeply into her eyes. Chapter 2784. Dmo Xian knew that the young lady's words were just to brush him off. The girl didn't want to tell him the reason why she was angry. He didn't pursue the matter any further. After all, he was only slightly interested in this young lady. The girl didn't want to talk about it. He was too lazy to ask any further. Dmo Xian did not ask. Yiqing Luo couldn't be bothered to say any more. The eyes of the surrounding guests all fell on the two of them. He saw the sweetness between the two of them. He had to admit it. The man was handsome and the woman was beautiful. When they were put together, no matter what they did, it was so pleasing to the eye. Even though it was a public kiss in the eyes of the crowd, they still couldn't bear to spoil it, because it was such a beautiful scene. This was a society that only cared about appearances. He was good-looking. Most of the time, they were easily forgiven. After this episode, the Holy Maiden selection of the Miao tribe had finally begun. Second Elder Miao and Fourth Elder Miao's attitude towards Miao Yi had obviously changed after the beating just now. It was not just these two elders. It was the same for the rest of the Miao tribe. After all, Yiqing Luo's attitude towards Miao Yi earlier. Although he didn't say anything. But anyone could tell that Yiqing Luo was supporting Miao Yi. Yiqing Luo's backing represented the overlord's backing. What's more, Yiqing Luo was the little hero of the West Continent, the elder sister of the current patriarch of the Three Springs sect. He was also the benefactor of many academies. Various identities, all indicated that Yiqing Luo was a master who could not be offended. He wanted to please Yiqing Luo. Naturally, they had to start from the people around Yiqing Luo. Because of this, Miao Yi was not obstructed by anyone during the selection process of the Miao tribe. Including Miao Yi, there were a total of 8 women participating in the selection. The oldest was 17 years old. The youngest was 11 years old. They were all women of the Miao tribe who were extremely talented in Gu techniques. Before the saintess selection began, Yiqing Luo specially spoke out and said a sentence: "The greatest respect towards the opponent is to go all out." So, there's no need to worry about Miao Yi's status. Just compete however you want. Yiqing Luo had already said this sentence. How could the other saintess candidates dare to go easy on him? If he went easy, it would be disrespectful to Miao Yi. Disrespecting Miao Yi was equivalent to disrespecting Yiqing Luo. Disrespecting Yiqing Luo was disrespecting the overlord. This complicated relationship was involved. Who could bear the consequences? Yiqing Luo's words were beneficial to Miao Yi. Miao Yi was able to subdue the ancient Gu king, so her strength was obvious. She didn't need her opponent to go easy on her. Moreover, if Miao Yi really became the Miao tribe's holy maiden, Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong's henchmen might make a big fuss about it. For example, Miao Yi could become the holy maiden of the Miao tribe. He merely relied on Yiqing Luo's help. As for the other sacred maiden candidates, they were afraid of offending Yiqing Luo and intentionally lost to Miao Yi. Even if Miao Yi relied on her own strength, no one would believe it. He would also be accused of being unjustifiable. Whereas Yiqing Luo had already made things clear before the selection. This would also indirectly block the schemes of Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong's henchmen. The truth had proven that Yiqing Luo's guess was not wrong. Miao Yi's strength had far exceeded her expectations. The reason why the Miao tribe could survive to this day was because of the Miao tribe's poison. Chapter 2785. Towards Gu worms, Miao Yi, who had contracted the king of venomous worms, was naturally not unfamiliar with them. No matter if it was the first round of distinguishing Gu worms, or the second round of analyzing the Gu worm's nurturing and the method to neutralize it, or the third round of intimate contact with Gu worms, Miao Yi had done extremely well. Her performance could be described as eye-catching and breathtaking. Even the elders who were originally extremely anxious couldn't help but stood up and clapped their hands. One must know how much pressure they were under just to sit here as the judges. Everyone knew that Miao Yi had been left outside by the previous clan leader since young. Unlike Miao Rongrong, who was the future sacred maiden whom the previous clan leader had meticulously nurtured. Plus Miao Rongrong's enmity towards Miao Yi. Miao Yi had been in Miao Miao for the past 10 over years, so she had no way to come into contact with anything related to goo worms. Later on, Miao Yi left Miao Miao tribe. Now, Miao Yi had just returned to Miao Miao tribe for a month. Even though Miao Yi had been trying her best to absorb the knowledge related to goo worms in this 1 month. But it was impossible for her to pass the sacred maiden selection safely in a short period of 1 month. The elders judging were afraid that Miao Yi would not be able to pass the test. Coupled with Yi Qing Luo's early warning, the other candidates didn't dare to go easy on Miao Yi, causing Miao Yi to fail and leave the competition, thus offending Yi Qing Luo. Their hearts had always been restless. Until Miao Yi's breathtaking performance. They finally put their hearts at ease. Miao Yi's performance. The other candidates didn't need to go easy at all. Miao Yi was able to pass the test easily and safely. While they were stunned, they were also curious. What method did Miao Yi use to be able to understand everything related to goo worms clearly in 1 month's time? After 3 rounds of selection. 8 candidates, there were only 3 left. Miao Yi's performance was without a doubt the best. By this time, the sky had already turned dark. The elder judging looked at the pitch-black sky and was about to say something. Suddenly, a female attendant walked up with a letter and passed it to the elder judging. After the elder judging saw the contents of the letter, his expression changed slightly as his gaze subconsciously shot towards the Miao tribe main building's long corridor. But there wasn't a single figure there. The judging elder shifted his gaze to Miao Yi. After hesitating for a moment, under everyone's gaze, he said word by word, "The last stage of the saintess selection is tonight. Tomorrow, you will have to raise a goo insect." He paused for a moment before continuing. According to the quality of the goo worms raised, the candidates who can enter the saintess realm and accept the ancient goo worms examination will be determined. When the judging elder announced the rules of the 4th round, everyone burst into an uproar. Especially the people of the Miao tribe, they were all stunned. Everyone knew, a good quality goo worm needed time to nurture. Tonight, or tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Which meant that from now until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, in such a short period of time, he managed to raise a good quality goo worm. Was this a joke? After reading the rules of the last round, the judging elder's expression was a little strange. The judging elder nudged him. Since when was there a rule for the 4th round? That judging elder's face was pale as he shook his head at him. Shortly after, he passed the letter in his hand over. After the curious judging elder saw the handwriting on the letter, he revealed the same expression as him. The Miao tribe members looked at each other. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.